space to prepare our hearts and our minds for tonight's testimony. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bree, and I'm here to give our summer series introduction. God is writing the greatest story ever told. It started at the beginning of creation, and it's told throughout hundreds of stories in the Old Testament. It culminates with the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. It develops with the indwelling of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost and continues throughout the New Testament, bringing it all to completion at the end when he makes all things new. But until then, he continues to write his stories in the lives and in the hearts of every single believer. He is writing a story in your life, through the ups, through the downs, and everything in between. Our summer series, we are exploring the stories that God is writing in and through the lives of the people in this very young adult community. And our prayer is that these stories will inspire each of us to see the way that God is moving in our own lives and ignite within us the courage to step forward and to let his story be known to those around us. That we might truly live out the words of Psalm 107, which says, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story. Those he redeemed from the hand of the foe, those he gathered from the lands from east to west, from north and south." And tonight, we have the pleasure of hearing from Pastor Tristan. Let's welcome him up.
How good was that worship? Golly, that was such a blessing. That was so good. All right, a lot of assumptions are made about pastors. I think oftentimes they're put on pedestals and seen as these like extra holy people. I'm talking about not me, but other pastors that you interact with that you're like, that's a pastor. I know you don't think that when you interact with me, but it's important that you know that any pastor is just a broken, messed up person that the Lord uses. And I think our culture doesn't do a great job of not putting people up on pedestals. But I hope that you hear from my story that it's the Lord and the work of his Spirit that should be glorified, never a pastor or a leader. And I hope you see that constant theme of the character of God throughout my story, that he's in the business of taking broken, messed up things and redeeming them for his glory. So I grew up in a Christian home near Sacramento, California, Vacaville, to be specific, Cowtown 707. Welcome to the yay area. Okay, that's Vacaville, baby. Come on. Yeah, literally means Cowtown. There's not that many cows, but my family still lives there. I have an older sister who's 4 years older than me. And in a Christian family, I found that I lived two different lives, whereas I played one person at church, and then I was a different person at school and with my peer group. And that kind of started this idea of an ethical compass that was pretty skewed, where I didn't really care about the truth as much as I did how I appeared or what I looked like. So there was lots of lying and dishonesty and hiding my decisions. I'm going to age myself a little bit, but my parents, they only allowed me to listen to Christian music, and we had CDs called compact discs. And so I had a line of all these Christian CDs, but my friends and I, we would burn other CDs. And so I would hide my sinful music in the CD cases. So it looked like I had all this Christian music, but if you really pop one out and put it in my portable CD player, I was listening to Eminem, okay, instead of the OC Supertones. So that was part of my lying and dishonesty throughout my life. I had said the sinner's prayer multiple times, every time our church did it. I would pray it every time because I just didn't want to go to hell. They make hell sound like the scary place, and I don't want to go there, so I'm just going to keep praying this, and hopefully one of them sticks. But I never really had a real relationship with Jesus growing up. I was addicted, like many are, to porn as a teenager. And that really caused me to idolize sex as the thing that would bring the ultimate fulfillment that I was looking for. And I see that in the ways that even from third grade on, I was in a relationship. as silly as like a third grade girlfriend could be. Like you don't even talk to her, you just see her across the playground. It's like, it's my girlfriend over there. I've never talked to her, but we sent a letter once and she checked the yes box, so we're good. But throughout that, from third grade on, I can see even just the patterns of looking for intimacy, to be seen and known and loved through those relationships. I tried to fill it, and then each relationship kind of throughout middle school and high school, I kept kind of pushing the physical limit to try to find that fulfillment and intimacy. And then eventually by high school, I was like regularly having sex, and I was the envy of my buddies, okay, of like the locker room talk. I was sharing about all of my sexual escapades, lying a bunch about all the other things, trying to make it sound so much better than it actually was. But internally, I was so unfulfilled. And I realized that my porn addiction had made me think that sex was going to be like the most satisfying pinnacle of life ever. But every time that it happened, I felt this like sinking pit in my stomach afterwards and this bad taste in my mouth. And I actually only felt like more empty afterwards. So I started paying attention to that. I was regularly going to church, and eventually, like through high school, some of the things that I had learned from growing up in the church started to sink in a little bit. Like maybe there's actually something to this Jesus thing. But it was at that time that there was kind of a big moment for me of God waking me up. So it was my junior year. I'd been dating a girl for about a year or so, and we were sexually active. She was over at a friend's house one night at a sleepover, and I got a call in the middle of the night that she was on the way to the hospital. She had bent down to pet her friend's dog, and it had reared up and bit her in the face. And so I drove to the emergency room, and she was there, and I'll spare you the gruesome details, but she ended up having to have over 60 stitches throughout her face. One of the teeth of the dog caught the corner of her eye, and it was like a millimeter away from her being permanently blinded. And so as a junior in high school, I sat there on the curb after we had got back from the hospital, and sitting there on the curb that night with her, and she was just sobbing. She was so broken. She felt like her life was over. She felt like there was nothing worth living for. And she felt completely hopeless. And I didn't have any hope to give her. I didn't know I froze. And when you live your entire life for yourself, and you build a selfish life, and then when that life gets turned completely upside down, you don't have anything. So I drove home that night, and I had never felt so out of control of my own life before. And so I drove home, and I remember I had a sunroof thing, and I was looking up at night at the stars, and I was crying myself, and for the first time in my life, I really cried out to the Lord. I was like, God, if you're real, and if you're actually listening, and if you care about any of this, will you please help her? And I didn't know. I was like, I could heal her. I don't just help her somehow. And it felt like such a desperation prayer. The next morning, I went over to her house, and she opened the door, and her demeanor had completely changed. She was bright. She was smiling. She was laughing. She had they had given her an eye patch, and she was pretending to be a pirate. And I was like, what is going on? Are you on meds? How strong the stuff did they give you? Why the big change? And she was like, I just can't explain it. Something happened last night, and I just felt like there was this burden just being lifted off of me. I can't explain it. I don't have any reason why. I just feel like everything is going to be okay. Now, I realize that this doesn't prove God's existence and that doubters could poke a million holes in that, but it sure made me pay attention. It felt like it was like a breadcrumb from the Spirit that I had already started to pick up on through my unfulfillment and sex and a lot of other things in my life and some of these patterns of lying, and just thinking that it was the Spirit saying come on, I'm leading you. I'm prodding you. I'm using these moments to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, will you come and follow me? I started to realize that maybe this whole faith thing is real. So I started paying attention at church. I started realizing the extent of my own sin, And I started really reading the Bible and actually listening to what it said and recognizing, whoa, like this grace thing. There's a lot to this whole grace thing, and realizing my own need for it. So I told my girlfriend that I wanted to take following Jesus seriously, and that I wanted to change some things in my life, and that first and foremost, we had to stop having sex. She said she was actually feeling the same conviction, and so we kind of started following Jesus together. Eventually, that relationship ended, but that was a big catalyst for me in my relationship with the Lord. Let me just say as a side note, man, when you've crossed those physical boundaries in a relationship, they are so difficult to walk back. We messed up a ton after that. It wasn't just like, oh, we just decided not to and then we didn't anymore. It is so difficult to walk those boundaries and to reestablish them as a boundary line, but I was committed to reestablishing them, and it is possible to do so, just as encouragement. It's difficult, but it is possible. After that, I began serving in church and going on mission trips. I went to Mexico, I went to Africa twice, started serving in kids ministry and serving at a homeless ministry through my church, and man, I started seeing God working. It was through those moments of like stepping out that I was able to fully surrender my life to him and realize that he was actually calling me into ministry. And as I was reflecting on like what I learned from that season of just like going, of feeling like, hey, there's an opportunity, yeah, I need to go, was that you'll never know what Jesus can do through you if you stay in the boat. You never know what Jesus can do through you if you stay in the boat. Think about Peter on the waves. Right? He wouldn't have walked on water if he would have stayed in the boat. It takes actually an enormous amount of courage to step out, but when you do, watch what Jesus does. Watch what he does through you. And so through those mission trips, as I just mentioned, serving my church, I felt called to be a pastor. Some people in my life were like calling that gifting out in me of like, dude, you should be a pastor. They called me Reverend Tristan, which is not as cool as PT, but they're like, that's Reverend Tristan. I had hair, so I was cooler back then. So I moved up to Portland, Oregon to go to Multnomah Bible College. It's closed now. Sorry, Multnomah. But that is where I met my amazing wife, Kari Norris. I don't know. We got married just after I graduated. She's right here. She's looking at me. But at Bible college, it was a great experience. I loved it. But one thing I want to unpack is that alcohol wasn't allowed during the semester. It's not only a dry campus. We were supposed to take we signed a contract to say, even on or off campus, we're not going to consume alcohol. But on breaks, it was fair game. Between semesters, it was all good. So every time I went home to California, the Yay area, Vacaville, 707, okay. Every time I went home, I drank, and I love to drink, and my family loves to drink, so we drank. And I started drinking pretty heavily whenever I was home, and it created this like binge mentality of like, I'm only home for 2 weeks, like I gotta throw them back. And then I graduated, and it was like, I can drink whenever, so let's throw them back. So I just kept doing that, and I just kind of carried that lifestyle with me. I'm allowed to drink, so I'm gonna drink. Also, as a side note, I'd been in a car accident in college, and this had kind of messed up my neck and my back. So I'd been struggling with chronic pain. But I realized through the years of after graduating college that alcohol actually became how I dealt with everything. Physical pain, emotional pain, anxiety, depression, stress, disappointment. Eventually, with like my chronic pain, I added weed to my regimen because I convinced myself it was medicine, it was medicinal, it was healthier than like alcohol to help my pain, but really I was just finding another way to numb myself and escape. At that time, we were living up in Seattle. I was working at a college up there. I found myself disconnected from community. Kari was really sick through both of our boys' pregnancies. She shared her testimony last year, so if you want to hear more about her story, it's in there. But she was really sick, and so I just kept this pattern of like numbing and escaping. And I convinced myself that I wasn't addicted to either of them, that I was in control of all that. But then when Kari would raise concern about those things, I didn't pull back on those things. I just started hiding them from her more about what I was doing and using. Also that porn addiction and then some other intimacy problems started resurfacing in that season. And I wasn't talking to anybody about it. Things got harder and harder in that season, and so I just numbed and escaped more. I just kept sweeping them under the rug and figured that eventually like things would change in my life or things would get better or I'd figure some crap out and stop these habits. But I hope that you've clocked in the story at this point that these like addictions and these unhealthy sin habit patterns were after I'd given my life to Jesus. They were after Bible college. They were after I was married. They were after I was a dad. Like sin habits, they don't just disappear because you said yes to Jesus. And porn habits, they don't go away when you get married. And the lack of integrity and patterns of living dishonestly that I had for years growing up kept resurfacing in my life because I hadn't actually like processed through them or dealt with them at all. So I was in a pretty dark place at that point. I was depressed. And I reached out to my church and began meeting with a pastor who offered biblical counseling. And he helped kind of pull the string of sin because I wanted to stop the sin habits, but he helped see some of the underlying, like this, not just sin as a symptom, but like what the underlying cause was of why I was doing these things. And some of the things like surfaced from my childhood about why these patterns of lying and hiding and numbing and escaping and ways that I'd been starved for intimacy. But I'll never forget, my pastor looked me in the eye and said, if you want freedom, everything has to come out into the light. Week after week, he'd tell me the same thing. If you want freedom, everything has to come into the light. Can't be hiding this anymore. So I confessed it all to Kari. I had to call some of my closest friends from Bible college that I had kind of been ignoring and disconnected from. And I had to tell them everything, and it was so hard. It was hard to see the pain that my hidden sin had caused my wife and my friends. It was excruciating. Sin causes brokenness and hurt and fracturing of relationships. From then on, I realized how essential the practice of confession is. To have people in your life that you're regularly confessing these small sin habits in your life. That's the only way to keep them from becoming big, disastrous sin habits. The Lord taught me a ton in this season all about integrity, where the inner parts of your life match the outer parts, which is something I had wrestled with ever since I was like born. That I don't actually have to have some dark secret sin in my life that I hide from others, and that I can't actually bring that into the light. And in fact, when we shine a light on the inner darkness of secret sin, it's actually the only way to expose it. Y'all, when the Bible says the truth will set you free, it means it. If you want freedom, everything has to come into the light. So I had wrestled with alcohol and weed after this tough season 2, just like the sex before marriage thing in that previous relationship. It's really hard to break sin habits, but it's possible. I've been clean from alcohol and porn and weed for several years now, but they're also not really ever not going to be temptations for me. It's not just something that you like get over and it gets to be in your rearview mirror. Like it's something that you have to be vigilant about. So I have to make sure that I have preventative things in my life if I start drifting towards these addictions and to not let my guard down. It's a quote from Seven Samurai, an old school Japanese movie. I'm gonna hit you with it. It says, the second that you become the most comfortable, you become the most vulnerable. It's this idea of like, don't let yourself become comfortable. To not let my guard down. My wife has my screen time passcode. I have to steer clear of dispensaries, even if I'm trying to get that like balm stuff for my body. I can't go into them. I've had to say no to even just like small amounts of alcohol because I'm not a good steward with it. And I talk with my best friend from college every few days, and we're constantly confessing those little sprouts of sin habits in our lives that bubble up in difficult seasons. We do that often with one another. And you have to stay vigilant in exposing the small things before they grow into big things. I also want to say there's no shame in getting help. I've been on antidepressants for about 10 years. I've seen counselors work through things. God uses counselors and doctors and medication and community as gifts of his grace. But they're also not like an easy one-stop solution. Like there's a whole pie chart of things that we need to do to create healthy habits and sustain them. Our diet and exercise, those factor in a lot too. But reach out. There's no shame in using those to help aid your walk. talk to someone, and don't carry that stuff alone. I also want to make a note on sex before marriage and porn and weed and alcohol. When I tell you to stay away from those things, it's not some sanitized preacher who thinks he's better than you telling you what a sinner you are if you do those things. Instead, it's like a corn maze, right? You're in a corn maze and you start walking down a path and you see me coming from that path and I'm just like, dude, don't go that way. It's a dead end. That's not what you're looking for. It's not the way out. Turn around. Now, if you decide to keep going there, you can. You're just going to learn yourself that that's not the way to fulfill. Or you could just like listen to your bald boy for a second and realize like maybe I should listen. It's not going to fulfill you. But none of that stuff is said out of judgment. It's from experience to tell you that it will let you down. So here we are now, Kari and I, we've been married for 14 years. We love being in ministry. We love pouring into this community. I've been here at Crossroads for 4 years. I'm not planning on going anywhere. For us, I see, the pastoral calling that I felt like was placed over my life in high school, and then I had the charisma to be a pastor, and then I went to Bible college to have the competency to be a pastor, but I was missing the character to be a pastor. And the Lord really needed to work some of those things out in my life in my 20s to bring those things into the light before he's like, now I can use you, right? And it wasn't that I have it all figured out or that I'm not a messy, broken person anymore, but it was like, now you know the systems of integrity. Now you can live vulnerably and not feel like you have to hide things in order to pastor. We're here. We've got roots here. We live in the house that Kari's dad built and that she grew up in, which is such a gift. So y'all are stuck with this bald man, whether you like it or not. Get used to it. We have 3 children, 2 biological boys. We have Grayson, who's 11 years old, and Kyler's, who's 9. And then our daughter, who we fostered since about the day she was born. We got to adopt her about a year ago, but yeah, Morgan, she's 3.5 years old, and she is a spitfire. If you know her, you know her. Look out. Fostering was a super hard season for us. It was pretty terrifying to live with the thought of any day you could get a call that would just take your daughter from you. So we had to not only entrust her to the Lord, but also realize like actually our biological kids could get taken from us at any time. Like each day we have with them is a gift. How are we going to love and parent them with the days that the Lord gives us with them? But as hard as the fostering season was, we didn't know that the Lord was preparing us for maybe a more difficult season, which is that this past January I was diagnosed with cancer. And in case you're new to our community, I'll just give you the overview real quick. So it's thyroid cancer. It's spread throughout my neck and my lungs. I had 2 major surgeries, one in February and one in March, to remove the majority of lymph nodes in my neck, take out my thyroid. And then I did radiation in mid-June to hopefully get some of the smaller stuff. I'll go back in a few months in December to have more scans and then to talk about what the next phase of treatment looks like. The doctors have told me that my specific cancer is not one that necessarily goes away, but will just need to be managed. So rather than cancer just being able to be in like the rear view mirror of my story, it's like hop on in, get in the car, you're just gonna be along for the ride with us on this journey. Now, for those of you who already knew about my cancer, I know that you're like, oh, like he's sharing his testimony, he's gonna talk about his cancer. And that's probably the thing you wanna hear most, but I'm not ready to process it. I'm not ready to talk about it. Still walking through it. This chapter of God's story in my life is still being written. And I look forward to the day in which I get to talk about it more and unpack it and process it with you. But for now, I'll just say that I trust the author and the story he's writing through my cancer. I know he will redeem it and bring beauty in the midst of the suffering. He's gonna keep on writing my story, and I'm gonna keep trusting him and responding to him. But I hope you hear through this whole story that each and every one of us is broken and messed up. The Lord knows that. We all have our own sin habits and temptations and difficult seasons, but God is right there with us through it all. And he can use ordinary, broken people if we have the courage to step out and respond to him. He redeems us, and then he does incredible things. and uses us through us for his glory. And this is just one of the many chapters of the greatest story ever told.